Okay. So let's read through this. This isn't our next sort of unit. Our next topic is going to be something a little bit more practical, writing instructions and directions. But before we get to that, it seems as though it would be a wasted opportunity at best, if not irresponsible, for us to not talk about the U.S. election and what is happening now in the aftermath and counting period, and what we expect to happen in the future. So this is the what you're looking at is the New York Times daily news sort of summary. And I know this is sort of throwing back to our current events unit that we finished a week or two ago, but it seems sort of important and something that we shouldn't overlook just because it doesn't fit in exactly with our curriculum right this minute. So this is the email that I got from the New York Times this morning, summarizing the latest sort of happenings. So let's just read it. There are a couple of things in here that I want particularly to bring your attention to, and because they are important to the ideas that we've already talked about in terms of critical thinking and the role of the media and things of that nature, but also just sort of real world repercussions here. So this is a dark and dangerous moment for American democracy. A sitting president has spent months telling lies about non-existent voter fraud. It's a pretty strong statement. So, well, let me finish that paragraph and then we're going to pause there for a second. Now that his re-election bid is in deep trouble, but with the outcome still uncertain, he has unleashed a new torrent of falsehoods claiming that the other side cheated. He has demanded the Supreme Court intervene to decide the election in his favor. Now, what strikes you about that? In terms of, from the perspective of journalism.
Might be truthful.
It might be truthful.
No, why be truthful?
Why be truthful?
Yeah, like why would you? Lying works.
Well, I suppose we have a few years of evidence now saying that lying does work. So, however, that underscores our headline here. If we're not trusting people to generally sort of tell the truth, I mean, we've never expected politicians to be entirely truthful, right? That's, lawyers and politicians are the most famous liars there are. But this seems to be something. This seems to be something new, and this is. They're going to pick up this thread below and explain it a little bit more, what I'm talking about here. But what I'm talking about is that it's pretty hard to look at that and say, well, that's unbiased news coverage. But on the other hand, well, so here's the thing, and this is going to be hard for you guys because you haven't lived through enough sort of election cycles to really get a sense for this. But news media outlets have always been nonpartisan. Right? They're not supposed to be taking sides in politics. They're supposed to be presenting the views of both sides and allowing voters to choose. That is what is supposed to happen. That is what always happened until maybe the last decade or two. You saw with the rise of Fox News becoming not nonpartisan. They were clearly in favor of Republican politicians and policies. But still, if you knew that Fox News was coming at things from a Republican angle, then you could just take whatever they said with a grain of salt and still consult with NBC or ABC or any other network that has news, any other magazine or newspaper, and expect them to deliver unbiased is not a reasonable expectation, but nonpartisan is what the media is supposed to be. And they tried very hard at it. But what they have come to now is they've reached a point where that's not possible anymore. So let's continue this first section here. His supporters are staging protests in Arizona, Michigan, Nevada, and Pennsylvania meant to interfere with legitimate vote counting. In Phoenix, some have showed up at the state capitol with guns, as you can see in this short video. There's a link there, taken by my colleague. The worst Democratic outcome, in which judges appointed by the president's political party intervene to overrule the apparent will of voters, seems likely to be avoided. So that is, I want to say that that's a relief. But the fact that that's even a possibility, that you could be the president and appoint judges who could overrule things, overrule democratic processes and keep you in power, seems like the opposite of democracy, right? Like that's what they do in countries where they have farcical elections. One thinks of Russia and places like that, where sure, they technically have elections, but it's not possible to vote out the guy in charge. So the seems likely to be avoided is not strong enough language to make me feel better about it. Like the fact that that's even a possibility, even if it's one that we could avoid, is a little bit terrifying for those who don't want the United States to turn into a dictatorship. The Supreme Court has shown no signs of halting vote counts. This is good. And Joe Biden's lead in the decisive states may end up being large enough to avoid the election hinging on the sort of ballot counting minutia, like hanging chads that decided the 2000 result in Florida. This, again, you would be too young to remember, but in 2000, the election was between George W. Bush and Al Gore. And basically they were tied, and they were counting and recounting and recounting ballots in Florida to decide the winner, and eventually the courts had to decide. So there was whatever. We don't need to get into all of the details of that. But it took a long time for them to settle, and courts were involved in settling the election, which was fairly, not how it's supposed to work. Fairly uncool. So this is the part that I wanted to get to here. President Trump's actions are still causing significant damage. They undermine his supporters' faith in the country's government. So what they mean there is what he's saying now and the actions he's trying to take now mean that the people who support him are not going to accept Donald Trump losing as a legitimate outcome. So he's claiming that this is fraud and then the system's all rigged, even though he's in charge of the system. So I'm not sure how he could rig it, how the other side could rig it against him. But regardless, they also undermine the credibility of the United States around the world, which means no one takes countries seriously where they don't have proper elections, and that seems to be, the United States is going down that path to becoming some sort of a, I don't know, undeveloped country. And they force election officials, journalists, and social media platforms to choose between telling the truth and sounding nonpartisan. It is impossible to do both. So this is something that's unprecedented in American history. And it may not feel like it matters that much. I don't know, does it feel like it matters to you guys?
Windows system is pretty good here. Compared to them, we don't have to leave with that side.
Yeah, there is a sense of we don't have to worry about that so much here. And there's a truth to that, but there's also a gravitational pull that the United States exerts on us that we're unavoidably inside their sphere of influence, and their politics inevitably influences ours. And so the media in Canada also has to, and the media in Canada has never taken sides in American elections. But they kind of have to now. It's either, well, if we say that he is lying, then it sounds like we're anti-Republican, but he's lying. So I guess we are anti-Republican, or at least we're anti-Trump, or we're anti-lies. So the problem is that this isn't going away, and even though it's not our country, it isn't going away. And even if they decide that Joe Biden has won the election and they manage to have a transition without, civil war or significant civil unrest, even if that happens, the country's already ruined, and a lot of people here along with it, in terms of their ability to think critically about what's happening in the world and about what they see and hear in the media and on social media. And so they started pushing already 4 years ago this idea that the truth was relative, right? That there isn't any actual truth in anything, and that you could just kind of make up your own truth. Like, I'm not sure that he even knows that he's lying anymore. He just tells the truth that he wants to tell, which is what dangerous sociopaths do. Well, this is a lot of me talking, but what are your guys' thoughts about this? Gabinator? Do you have any thoughts?
No, not really.
Sorry, you just looked like you had something there.
At some point we'll go back to the States. I'm from there.
Yeah,
Whether Trump or Biden wins doesn't bother me, but I've been reading up on Biden. He wants to nurse the gas and car economy.
he wants to.
He wants to take away gas and shit for cars.
Well,
in a way.
Yeah,
He wants
like
to support
that's not
cars.
exactly his policy is that he's going to take away gas, but he is trying to promote
Electric cars.
more electric cars and things like that. I think that's true. Yeah, which is
I just prefer gas. More fun.
sure,
E-
sure,
either-
yeah, sure. But like, is that the issue that decides things for most people? I don't know.
Depends on where you live in the States.
I suppose. But the thing is that, well, there's lots of things, I guess. I think that what we have seen is that most people don't even really seem to care about the issues anymore. Like, the people don't even know what are the policies. Like, you at least looked some stuff up and to learn about the policies. It doesn't seem as though Trump supporters in particular seem to know exactly what the policies are. They don't care. They just want him to be the boss. And there's nothing that he could say or do that would convince them that they should not vote for him. There's literally nothing. And that's basically half of the American population. Now, I'm not opposed to people having more conservative views. That's politics, right? That's fair. That's fair game. But having your allegiance, I guess, be to a party, I'm not even sure it's to a party, it's to an individual, where it doesn't even matter anymore. You're going to vote that way no matter what. But you don't even have to think. That's a problem, isn't it? Like, what is it that you care about? And it's not a sport where it's like, yeah, I'm going to cheer for the Jets regardless of, who they trade or what free agents they sign or whatever. I'm still going to cheer for the Jets. Politics isn't supposed to be like that, right? You're supposed to be able to think through the issues that are important to you and decide how you're going to vote based on what's important to you. So, if running your vehicle on gasoline is important to you, then that's your issue, I guess. But no one has said, and to be fair, the Trump campaign has kind of tried to frame it like Biden wants to take away all of our gas, and obviously he never said that. It's not even remotely possible for him to do that. But he wants to promote more.
Tesla cars and electric cars.
Yeah, well, I don't think it's a brand thing, but yeah, more environmentally friendly things, which the science would say is probably a good idea in terms of protecting the environment. So, fine, but like that's not the issue that would that would decide anything for me, but I would take that into consideration. But that would be what's called the straw man argument. So the straw man, what Biden said was, oh, I want to promote more renewable energy or whatever, something along those lines. And then the straw man argument is, he said he wants to take away all of our gas. And it's like, well, that's not what I said. But yeah, so anyways, we get most of our information, most of our social media and news media comes from the United States. And so, like, this is, whether we think we're safe from fighting in the streets, we might be for now, but we're not safe from people believing the BS. And that changes our politics too. Maybe people in Canada decide that there's no benefit to telling the truth anymore. We just straight up lie and see if how long we can get away with it, how far we can push it for our own political purposes and to stay in power. Anyways, I thought this bit about forcing election officials, journalists, and social media platforms to choose between telling the truth and sounding nonpartisan is finally, that I kind of had sensed this, but had never seen it put into exact words before. But all of the complaints from Republicans about Donald Trump in particular, about the so-called liberal media, right? Have you heard that? The leftist media. This is what he's talking about. So they either tell the truth or they try to sound neutral. But if one side is lying, then it's impossible to report the facts and still say neutral, because you are then reporting that side is lying.